Hi, I'm Kaylee Snyder. Today I'm going to talk to you about schizophrenia. We're going to talk about the disease itself, just the description of it. We'll talk about what it takes to be diagnosed with schizophrenia, like the DSM-5 criteria. We'll talk about some causes, some symptoms, and then we'll just talk about the quality of life for these people, what they're at risk for. So the description, plain and simple, we'll just say what it is. It's a brain disorder that causes psychotic thinking or behavior which displays as positive and negative symptoms. I know that I just read that out loud, but I promise we'll get more in depth as we keep moving on here. So the causes, let's talk about that first. So genetically, you are at increased risk if you have a sister or a mother that has schizophrenia. You're actually at an increase of 10%, as the rest of the population we're at a 1% increase. And then genetics plays a big role in like 65 to 80% of schizophrenic cases also have someone else in their family that have it too. And then drug use. Drug use is a big cause. So drugs like cocaine and meth and even marijuana, they can cause increase in dopamine. And dopamine is the big problem here. We have too much dopamine, which is causing all these excessive symptoms like the hallucinations and delusions, which we'll talk about here in a second, but that's another cause. And then the structural abnormalities. So when you look at a CT or an MRI or even a CAT scan, we'll see like enlarged ventricles, increased fissure size, reduced frontal lobe volume. Those are just some things that we see, and that's also what's like going with schizophrenia. That's what we see in those reports. And then for prenatal stress that I mentioned, hypoxia is one of the things that I'm going to talk about. When you're in utero and let's say the mom is like, I don't know, preeclampsia, and then she ruptures. I just think that when that happens, we just don't get as much things to our brain, which can cause these structural abnormalities. I'm not really sure. But then, as well as like stress in the mother can have an effect later in life. And then the physiological stressors, we'll talk about the diathesis key model. So in the diathesis stress model. So basically, you're predisposed to this disease. It's already there. And then, so that's like the door. And then the diathesis, that's the lock. So it's locked away. It's no symptoms. You're just living your normal life. And then you have a stressor, like you go to jail, your house burns down, you get a divorce. And all this stress unlocks that key, and then that's when symptoms start presenting. And that accounts for a lot of mental illnesses, not just schizophrenia. All right, we'll keep going on. We'll start talking about the symptoms. So some symptoms, these are the positive symptoms. You'll have hallucinations, alterations in speech, delusions, and bizarre behavior. So with the alterations, like in the hallucinations can be anything. You could be hearing voices or sounds that could be telling you to harm yourself or harm somebody else. You can see people that aren't really there. You can smell odors. You can taste things that aren't there. And then you can even have like body sensations, like spiders are crawling all over you when they're really not. It's just an awful thing to have to go through. And then with the alterations in speech, sometimes people have something called word salad, and it's just a jumble of meaningless words to the person saying it, and for sure the person hearing it. And then there's things called neologisms. It's just a bunch of made-up words that mean something to the speaker but don't have any meaning to anyone else. Okay, we'll keep going. So the negative symptoms. You have the blunt affect, that's basically just like having one expression all the time. You don't really change expressions. You have the algelia, which that is just the client might say some things, but then just mumbles the rest of the things. Anergia, that's lack of energy. And then volitation, it's lack of motivation and activities and hygiene. And then another thing that they have is the anhedonia, and I don't have that listed here, but it's just like you feel like you don't have any joy, that you don't want to do things that you used to want to do, you're just not happy. Okay, we'll keep moving on. So this is the diagnostic criteria for the DSM-5. I'm just going to read this to you. It's the presence of 2 or more of the following, each present for a significant portion of time during a 1-month period or less if successfully treated, with at least one of them being 1, 2, or 3, which the 1, 2, or 3 is the delusions, hallucinations, and the disorganized speech. It's grossly disorganized is another one, and then 5 is the negative symptoms we just talked about. And they need to have this for at least 6 months, but it has to have at least 1 full month of the other symptoms, and then paroxysmal symptoms often precede the active phase. So, and then you might have mild and forms of hallucinations later in life. So we can talk about the phases that I just mentioned back in the diagnostic. So phase 1 is the acute phase. That's when it's the onset, and it's also an exacerbation of symptoms. And then in this phase, that's when you usually have the positive symptoms. And this is when you need like increased care, hospitalization. Phase 2 is stabilization. Symptoms are diminished and they're going back to baseline, but you still have the symptoms. They might need a group home, but they definitely still need some type of care to help them. And then phase 3 is the maintenance phase. They're either at their pre-morbid level or they're almost at baseline. They still might have a few symptoms, but they're in their baseline state and they can live in the community. So some treatments. Basically, gold standard in antipsychotics. We have different types. We have first gen, second gen, and third gen. In the first gen, Haldol, that's our drug. Like that's the drug that we usually use to treat this. But with the first gen, they act on the D2 receptors, which can produce like extrapyramidal side effects. It can cause sexual dysfunctions. So you really need to watch, for those extrapyramidal side effects, like the restless, the muscle contractions, the tongue protruding, the drooling, just because some of those things aren't reversible. And then for the second gen, they act on the D4 receptors, so they have less of a chance of the EPS side effects. And I listed some common ones you can read through right there. Let's go to the third gen. So it's a dopamine stabilizer, or it's also called like a partial agonist. So it might increase dopamine where it's low, but it might decrease dopamine where it's too high. So it's not an agonist, but it's not an antagonist either. And then a common one for that is Abilify. We don't really see this used in schizophrenia that often. We usually see it used in other disorders because it's just not as effective as our Haldol. So, is that the end? No. I know that you heard. Okay, so we're done, right? I talked about everything I just told you I talked about. No, we're not done. It's not the end. I know you heard the background noise. That is one of the positive symptoms I talked about. That's the hallucination that he was saying, kill yourself, and just awful things. And then there was just a bunch of jumbled noises and sounds. And if you had to hear that all day, what would that put you at risk for? Suicide. So as nurses, we need to make sure that we are promoting the therapeutic communication to lower the anxiety that these people are feeling. We need to establish trust with them, encourage them to have friendships, and then just some other things that we could do is tell them to listen to music or to go on a walk. We don't want to say, no, you don't have that perception, because they do. We have to say things like, I understand that you see this, but I do not. We just don't want to make them trust us any less, because there might be something telling them that they don't want to trust us. You don't want to argue with them. You want to focus on their feelings. You want to sympathize and empathize. You want to ask about these perceptions that they're having. You want to get to know them so you can help them in a time of crisis. It's such a big deal right now. We need to focus on conversations based on reality-based subjects and identify the triggers. Like loud noises can cause situations to come up. Like if there's a loud noise, it could cause the delusion to start. And you need to be genuine and empathetic when dealing with these clients. I can't empathize that enough. And then from there, you just have to hope that they get better. You have to hope that the medications and it might take a while for medications to start working, because it's complicated. I think that's all I have to say. If there's anything else, you can put it in the comments. Thanks.